Ellie Morgan pressed her hand over her little brother's mouth as their father's boots thundered across the wooden floor above them. She could smell the whiskey from the cellar. She could hear him calling her name like a curse. She was 19 years old. She had buried her mother. She had raised her brother. And tonight she had just learned the truth. Her own father had sold her to a man who ran the dirtiest saloon in Texas, but fate rides a dusty trail. And sometimes salvation comes wearing a wanted poster and a gun. If this story touches your heart, please subscribe and follow Ellie's journey to the very end. Drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Dusty Creek, Texas, summer of 1878. The heat was killing everything. The crops, the cattle, the hope. But nothing was dying faster than Ellie Morgan's spirit. "Ellie, where the hell are you, girl?" Walter Morgan's voice cut through the farmhouse like a rusty blade. Ellie stood at the kitchen stove, stirring a pot of beans that was mostly water. Her hands didn't shake anymore. She had trained them not to. "I'm here, Pa." He appeared in the doorway, 52 years old, but liquor had aged him into something ancient and mean. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt was stained, and in his hand he clutched an empty bottle like a weapon. "Where's my supper?" "It's coming, Pa. 5 more minutes." "5 minutes?" He laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. "Your mama used to have supper ready when I walked through that door. Hot, fresh, ready." Ellie bit the inside of her cheek. She had learned years ago that defending herself only made things worse. "Yes, P. But you ain't your mama, are you?" Walter stumbled forward, grabbing the edge of the table for balance. "You ain't nothing like her. She was beautiful. Kind. You're just the reason she's dead." The words hit harder than any fist. Ellie had heard them 1,000 times. Her mother had died giving birth to Tommy, her little brother. But Walter had twisted the story in his whiskey-soaked mind. Somehow Ellie had become the villain. Ellie had killed his wife. Ellie had ruined his life. "Where's the boy?" Walter demanded. Ellie's heart clenched. "Tommy's doing his chores, P. He's feeding the chickens." "Feeding chickens?" Walter spat on the floor. "That boy's soft, just like you made him." "He's 7 years old, P. Don't you talk back to me." Walter's hands shot out, grabbing Ellie's arm. His grip was iron, despite the alcohol. He yanked her close, his breath hot and foul against her face. "You think you're better than me? You think you got the right to correct me in my own house?" "No, P, I'm sorry. You're always sorry." He shoved her backward. She hit the stove, knocking the pot. Boiling water splashed against her forearm. She gasped, but swallowed the scream. Walter didn't notice or didn't care. "I got business in town tonight," he muttered, turning away. "Don't wait up." He grabbed his hat and walked out the door, leaving Ellie alone with her burning skin and burning eyes. She didn't cry. Crying was a luxury she couldn't afford. Instead, she pumped cold water over her arm, watching the angry red welt rise on her skin. Another scar. Another reminder. "Ellie." The small voice came from the back door. Tommy stood there, his overalls dirty, his face worried. At 7 years old, he had his mother's gentle eyes and his father's dark hair. He was the only beautiful thing left in Ellie's world. "Hey, little man." Ellie forced a smile. "You finished with the chickens?" Tommy nodded, but his eyes were fixed on her arm. "Pa hurt you again." "It was an accident. I bumped the stove." "You always bump things when P is home." Ellie's heart broke a little more. Tommy was too young to understand and too old to be fooled. "Come here." She knelt down, opening her arms. Tommy ran into them, burying his face against her shoulder. She held him tight, breathing in the smell of dust and hay and childhood. "I don't like it when P drinks," Tommy whispered. "I know, baby. I know. Can we leave? Can we go somewhere else?" Ellie closed her eyes. She had asked herself that question every single day for the past 5 years. Every day since her mother died. Every day since Walter Morgan turned from a struggling farmer into a monster. "Someday," she whispered, "I promise. Someday we'll go somewhere far away, somewhere green and cool, somewhere P can't find us. Promise. I promise." But promises were cheap in Dusty Creek. And Ellie knew that running took money. Money she didn't have. Money Walter drank away as fast as he could earn it. She stood up, ruffling Tommy's hair. "You hungry?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then let's eat." They sat at the rickety kitchen table sharing a bowl of watered-down beans. Ellie gave Tommy the bigger portion. She always did. He was growing and she had learned to survive on scraps. "Lee," Tommy said between bites. "Yeah, I heard Pete talking to Mr. Brennan yesterday." Ellie froze. Roy Brennan was the owner of the Red Dust Saloon, the roughest establishment in 3 counties. He was a fat man with small eyes and big appetites. He looked at Ellie the way a wolf looked at a lamb. "What did they say?" Ellie kept her voice calm. "I don't know all of it," Tommy frowned, trying to remember. "But Mr. Brennan said something about you. He said you'd fetch a good price." P laughed. "He said he'd think about it." The beans turned to ash in Ellie's mouth. She knew what fetch a good price meant. She had seen the girls who worked at the Red Dust Saloon. They came in young and pretty. They left old and hollow-eyed, if they left at all. "Tommy, listen to me." Ellie leaned forward, gripping his small hands. "If anyone ever comes to this house when I'm not here, anyone at all, you run. You hear me? You run to the old Miller barn and you hide in the hoft. Don't come out until I come find you." "Why? Just promise me." Tommy's eyes were wide with fear. "I promise, Ellie. Good boy." She kissed his forehead. "Now finish your supper. Then it's time for bed." That night, Ellie couldn't sleep. She lay in the narrow bed shared with Tommy, listening to his soft breathing. The summer heat pressed down on them like a blanket. Sweat trickled down her neck. But it wasn't the heat keeping her awake. Roy Brennan. A good price. P laughed. The words circled her mind like vultures. She had to do something. She had to act. Waiting was no longer an option. Slowly, carefully, she slipped out of bed. Tommy murmured in his sleep, but didn't wake. Ellie crept to the window and they looked out at the darkness. The road to Abilene was 30 miles mid-east. If she could make it there, she could find work. Honest work. She could send for Tommy when she was settled. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was the only one she had. She moved silently through the house, gathering what little she could carry. A canteen of water, a hunk of stale bread, the small knife she used for peeling potatoes, and hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her room, the only treasure she possessed. Her mother's silver locket containing a tiny photograph of a woman with kind eyes. Ellie pressed the locket to her lips. "Help me, Mama," she whispered. "Please." She wrote a note for Tommy and tucked it under his pillow. "I'll come back for you, I swear on Mama's grave. Wait for me. I love you." Then she slipped out the back door and into the night. The moon was a sliver, barely enough light to see the path. Ellie walked fast, her heart pounding with every step. The town was 3 miles behind her. The main road was just ahead. If she could reach it before dawn, well. The voice came from the shadows. Ellie spun around. 3 men stepped out from behind the cluster of mesquite trees. She recognized them immediately. Clem, Dutch, and Porter. Roy Brennan's men. They worked at the saloon handling trouble and merchandise. "Where are you headed, Miss Morgan?" Clem grinned. He was missing 3 teeth. Little late for a stroll, Ellie's hand went to the knife at her belt. "Get out of my way." "Now that ain't friendly." Dutch stepped closer. He was the biggest of the 3, thick as a barrel. "Mr. Brennan sent us to keep an eye on you. He's got an investment to protect." "I ain't on his investment. I ain't nobody's property." "That's where you're wrong." Porter pulled a coil of rope from his belt. "Your daddy signed the papers this afternoon. You belong to the Red Dust now." The world tilted. Signed the papers. Her father had actually done it. He had sold her like livestock. His own daughter. "No," the word came out broken. "No, he wouldn't." "Oh, he would." Clem laughed. $50 and a case of whiskey. That's your price, sweetheart." "Got to say, I think Mr. Brennan got himself a bargain." Ellie ran. She didn't think. She just moved. Her feet flew over the rocky ground, her lungs burning. Behind her, she heard the men cursing, heard their boots pounding after her. "Get her. Don't let her reach the road." She was fast, but they were faster. Dutch tackled her from behind, driving her face first into the dirt. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. She tasted blood. Feisty little thing. Dutch flipped her over, pinning her wrists above her head. "I like that. I really do. Let me go." Ellie thrashed, kicked. Her knee connected with something soft. Dutch howled. "You little." His fist came down. Stars exploded behind Ellie's eyes. The world went gray at the edges. Enough. Clem grabbed Dutch's arm. Brennan wants her unmarked. You damage the goods, he damages you. Dutch spat blood onto the ground. Fine, but she owes me for that. They dragged Ellie to her feet. Porter tied her hands behind her back while Clem held her still. She was too dizzy to fight anymore. Too hurt. Too hopeless. Move! Clem shoved her forward. Time to meet your new owner. They marched her back toward town, toward the Red Dust Saloon, toward a fate worse than death. The saloon was loud, even at this hour. Piano music and drunken laughter spilled out into the street. The smell of cheap whiskey and cheaper perfume hung in the air like a fog. Roy Brennan was waiting on the porch. He was exactly as Ellie remembered, fat, sweaty, with piggy eyes that undressed her the moment they landed. He wore a brocade vest that strained against his belly and a gold watch chain that clinked when he moved. Miss Morgan, he smiled, revealing yellow teeth. Welcome to your new home. This ain't my home. Ellie's voice shook with rage. You can't own people. It's against the law. The law, Brennan laughed. Sweetheart, I am the law in Dusty Creek. The sheriff owes me money. The judge owes me favors. Nobody's coming to save you. He stepped closer, reaching out to touch her face. Ellie jerked away. Don't touch me. Oh, you'll learn. Brennan's smile didn't waver. They all learn, some faster than others. I'm hoping you're a fast learner, Ellie. I'd hate to waste such a pretty face. I'll kill you. The words came from somewhere deep inside her. Somewhere she didn't know existed. I swear to God, if you touch me, I'll kill you. Brennan stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed harder than before. I love Spirit. I really do. He turned to Clem. Put her in the back room. No food or water until morning. Let's see how much spirit she has after a few days. What about the boy? Boy? Clem asked. Ellie's blood froze. Tommy. Brennan smiled. Your father mentioned you have a brother, 7 years old. Yes, cute little thing. I hear he'd be worth quite a bit to the right buyer. No. Ellie lunged forward, but Dutch held her back. No, he's just a child. You leave him alone, then behave yourself. Brennan's voice turned cold. Do what you're told. Be a good girl. And maybe, just maybe, I'll let the boy stay on the farm. But if you cause me trouble, Ellie. Well, he shrugged. Children disappear all the time out here. It's a dangerous frontier. He wasn't bluffing. She could see it in his eyes. He would hurt Tommy. He would sell Tommy. He would do whatever it took to control her. Ellie stopped struggling. There we go. Brennan patted her cheek. I knew you were a fast learner. Take her away. They dragged her through the saloon, past the gambling tables and the working girls who looked at her with empty eyes, past the bar where men drank and laughed and didn't care about the girl being hauled through their midst. The back room was small and dark. It smelled like mildew and old sweat. They threw her inside and locked the door. Ellie lay on the cold floor, her hands still tied, her face throbbing. She didn't cry. She couldn't cry. Crying meant she was broken, and she wasn't broken. Not yet. Mama, she whispered into the darkness, please send someone. Send anyone. Don't let this be the end. Silence, just silence. And somewhere outside, the piano kept playing. 3 days passed. Brennan was true to his word. No food, no water, just darkness and heat and the slow erosion of hope. By the 3rd day, Ellie could barely lift her head. Her lips were cracked. Her throat was raw. She had stopped thinking about escape. She had started thinking about survival. Maybe if she just did what they wanted. No, she crushed the thought before it could take root. That's what they wanted. That's how they won. The lock rattled. Ellie forced herself to sit up, pressing her back against the wall. If they were coming for her, she would face them on her feet, or at least sitting. The door opened. Light flooded in, blinding her. She squinted, trying to make out the figure in the doorway. Stand up. It was Brennan's voice. You have a visitor. Visitor. Rough hands grabbed her arms and pulled her upright. She swayed, dizzy from dehydration. They half carried, half dragged her out of the room, through the back of the saloon and into Brennan's office. Brennan sat behind a massive oak desk, looking smug and sitting across from him. P. Walter Morgan looked 10 years older than he had 3 days ago. His hands were shaking. His eyes wouldn't meet hers. Ellie, his voice cracked. I, I came to what? The rage that had been smoldering inside her burst into flame. To watch, to count your money. You sold me, P, your own daughter. You sold me like I was nothing. I didn't have a choice, Walter's voice rose. I owe money, Ellie, bad money to bad people. If I didn't pay, so you paid with me. Ellie laughed, but there was no humor in it. You paid with Mama's daughter. How much, P? How much was I worth? Walter looked at the floor. $50. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. 50, Ellie felt something inside her break. Not her spirit, something else. Something she hadn't known was still there. The last thread of hope that her father might still love her. I'll buy her back. Walter's head snapped up. He was sweating now, desperate. I'll work. I'll find the money. Just give me time. Time, Brennan laughed. You can barely stand up straight, old man. The only thing you're good at is drinking. No, the deal is done. She's mine now. There has to be something. Actually, Brennan leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. There might be. I hear there's a cattle drive coming through tomorrow, headed west to California. They'll need supplies, fresh horses. If you can broker a deal, bring them here to spend their money, I might consider extending our arrangement. What do you mean? I mean, maybe I don't put your daughter to work tomorrow. Brennan's smile was cruel. Maybe I give her another week to acclimate, but only if you bring those cowboys to my saloon. All of them, with all their money. Walter nodded eagerly. I can do that. I know the trail boss. We served together in the war. I can convince him. Then we have a deal. Brennan stood up. Now get out and don't come back without those cowboys. Walter scrambled to his feet. He looked at Ellie one last time. His mouth open, closed. He couldn't find the words. Go on then, P. Ellie's voice was flat, dead. Go sell me again. Walter flinched like she had struck him. Then he turned and walked out the door. Ellie watched him go, the last family she had besides Tommy, walking away without a fight, without even trying. Take her back to the room, Brennan waved dismissively, and give her some water. I need her looking presentable tomorrow. We might have buyers. They dragged her back to the darkness. But this time something had changed. The tears that she had held back for so long finally fell. They rolled down her dirt-streaked face, silent and hot. She wasn't crying because she was broken. She was crying because she had finally let go of hope, let go of her father, let go of everything except one single thought. Tommy. Whatever happened to her, Tommy had to survive. Tommy had to escape. Tommy had to live. And somewhere on that dusty trail coming from the east, a cattle drive moved closer. A drive led by a man with nothing left to lose. A man who was about to change everything. The cattle drive hit Dusty Creek at high noon, 300 head of longhorn kicking up a cloud of dust that could be seen for miles. The thunder of hooves shook the wooden buildings. The smell of sweat and livestock rolled through the streets like a wave. And at the front of it all rode a man who looked like he had been carved from the land itself. Jacob Callahan sat tall in his saddle, his hat pulled low against the brutal sun. 34 years old, scarred, silent. His eyes moved constantly, scanning the town, reading every face, every shadow, every threat. Jake, his segundo, a grizzled cowboy named Hank, rode up beside him. Town looks rough. They all look rough. This one's different. I can smell it. Jake didn't answer. He had learned to trust Hank's instincts. The old man had ridden with him for 3 years, ever since Jake had fled Texas with a price on his head. We need supplies, Jake said. Finally, water the horses, rest the men. We move out at first light, and if there's trouble, Jake's hand drifted to the Colt on his hip. Then there's trouble. They rode into the main street. People stopped and stared. Cowboys, dusty and tired, filled the thoroughfare. Money on the hoof, money in their pockets. The town could smell it. Jake Callahan. The voice came from the porch of the general store. Jake turned his head slowly. Walter Morgan stood there waving his hat like a man flagging down a train. He looked worse than Jake remembered. Thinner, older, broken in ways that whiskey couldn't explain. Walter. Jake's voice was flat. Been a long time, too long. Too long. Walter hurried down the steps, nearly tripping. I heard you was coming through. Heard it from a trader last week. I said to myself, that's my old friend Jake. That's the man who saved my life at Shiloh. Jake said nothing. He remembered Shiloh. He remembered a lot of things he wished he could forget. Listen. Walter lowered his voice, stepping closer, his breath riot of alcohol. I know a place, good whiskey, good cards, good company. The Red Dust Saloon, best establishment in 3 counties. You bring your boys there tonight. I'll make sure you're treated right. We don't need entertainment. We need supplies and sleep. Come on, Jake. Walter's smile was desperate. For old times, 1 drink. What's the harm? Jake studied the man he had once called a friend. Something was wrong. Walter's eyes kept darting toward a building at the end of the street. A saloon with red curtains and a sign that read Red Dust. What's going on, Walter? Nothing's going on. You're lying, Jake's voice hardened. You were never good at it. What do you owe them? Walter's face crumbled. The facade shattered like cheap glass. Everything, he whispered. I owe them everything, Jake. And if I don't bring you to that saloon tonight, they'll hurt her. Who? Walter's eyes filled with tears, the tears of a broken man, a coward, a father who had sold his soul. My daughter. The word hung in the air between them. Jake felt something shift in his chest, something he had buried deep, something dangerous. Tell me everything, he said. Now Walter talked. He talked about the debt, the gambling, the drinking. He talked about Roy Brennan and the papers he had signed. He talked about Ellie, 19 years old, brave as fire, stubborn as stone, locked in a back room of the saloon for 3 days. He talked about Tommy, 7 years old, the only leverage keeping Ellie from fighting back. When he finished, Jake sat motionless on his horse. His face revealed nothing, but inside a storm was building. You sold your own daughter. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Jake's voice was ice. You just made the wrong one, I know. God help me, I know. Walter grabbed Jake's stirrup, desperate. But you can fix this. You have men, guns. You could, I could what? Start a war over a girl I've never met. Jake shook his head. That ain't my fight, Walter. Please. Walter fell to his knees in the dirt right there in the middle of the street in front of everyone. Please, Jake, I'm begging you. She's just a girl. She never did anything wrong. She raised her brother after her mother died. She kept that farm running while I drowned myself in whiskey. And I did this to her. Jake looked down at the man in the dirt. He thought about Clara, his wife, dead 5 years now, shot by the men who came to take their land. He thought about his daughter, Emma, who never got to take her first steps. He thought about all the people he couldn't save. Get up. Jake's voice was rough. You're making a scene. I don't care. Walter looked up, his face streaked with tears and dust. She's all I have left, Jake. The only good thing I've ever made. And I destroyed her just like I destroy everything. Jake closed his eyes. He could ride away. He should ride away. Every instinct told him to keep moving, keep running, keep surviving. But he heard Clara's voice in his head, the last thing she ever said to him. Don't let them make you hard, Jacob. Promise me. Don't let them take your heart. He opened his eyes. Where is she? Hope flickered in Walter's face. The saloon, back room. Brennan keeps her locked up. How many men does Brennan have? 6, maybe 7, plus whatever drunks he can round up. Jake looked at Hank. The old cowboy shrugged. Your call, boss. But if we're doing this, we do it smart. Jake nodded slowly. A plan was already forming in his mind. A dangerous plan. A stupid plan. The kind of plan that got men killed. Walter, Jake's voice was steel. You're going to take me to that saloon and you're going to introduce me to Roy Brennan. And then you're going to watch me buy your daughter back. The Red Dust Saloon was exactly what Jake expected. Loud, dirty, and full of men with more money than sense. He pushed through the swinging doors, Hank at his back. The piano stopped. Conversations died. Every eye turned to the stranger in the doorway. Jake let them look. I'm looking for Roy Brennan. A fat man at the back table set down his cards. He had the eyes of a pig and the smile of a snake. You found him. Brennan stood up, spreading his arms wide. Welcome to the Red Dust, friend. What can I do for you? I hear you have something for sale. Brennan's eyes narrowed. I have lots of things for sale. Whiskey, cards, company. You'll have to be more specific. A girl 19 years old, Morgan's daughter. The saloon went dead silent. Brennan's smile didn't waver, but something cold crept into his eyes. Now, where did you hear a thing like that? Doesn't matter where I heard it. Jake walked forward, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. What matters is the price. She ain't for sale. Everything's for sale. You taught me that. Brennan studied Jake for a long moment, taking his measure, calculating the risk. You're the trail boss, the cattle drive. That's right. I heard you're carrying quite a bankroll. California money. I am. Brennan's tongue darted out, wetting his lips. Greed flickered in his piggy eyes. The girl cost me $50 plus room and board for 3 days, plus the trouble of breaking her in. He pretended to calculate. Let's say $500. $500? Jake didn't blink. That's steep quality merchandise. Brennan shrugged. Take it or leave it. I'll give you 300. 450. 350. Final offer. Brennan hesitated. 350 was more than he'd make off the girl in a year. Maybe 2. And this cowboy looked like the kind of trouble that wasn't worth the profit. Done. Brennan stuck out his hand. You got yourself a deal, friend. Jake didn't shake it. He reached into his vest and pulled out a leather pouch. He counted out the bills slowly, deliberately, and dropped them on the table. Now bring her out. Brennan snapped his fingers. Clem, get the Morgan girl. Jake waited. The minutes stretched like hours. Then a door at the back of the saloon opened and Clem dragged the girl into the light. Jake's breath caught in his throat. She was thin, too thin. Her dress was torn and dirty. Her hair hung in tangles around a face that was bruised and pale. But her eyes were fire. Even now, after everything she had endured, there was no surrender in them, no defeat, just rage and defiance and a desperate burning will to survive. Jake had seen that look before in the mirror, every single day. Ellie Morgan. His voice was softer than he intended. She lifted her chin. Who's asking? My name is Jacob Callahan. I just bought your freedom. Ellie stared at him. Then she laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was bitter and broken and sharp as shattered glass. Bought my freedom. She shook her head. So I'm supposed to thank you, fall at your feet. You didn't buy my freedom, mister. You just bought me. Different owner, same cage. It ain't like that. It's always like that. She jerked her arm free from Clem's grip. Men like you, men like him, you're all the same. You see something you want, you take it, you dress it up in pretty words, but it's all the same in the end. Jake felt the eyes of the entire saloon on them. He knew he should be angry. He should put this girl in her place. That's what any other man would do. Instead, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Respect. You're right, Jake's voice was quiet. I did buy you, and that makes me know better than him. But here's the difference. He took a step closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. When we walk out that door, you're free. You want to run? Run. You want to spit in my face and never see me again? Do it. I won't stop you. Ellie's eyes searched his face, looking for the lie, looking for the trap. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this? Because someone should have done it for my wife. And no one did. The words hit Ellie like a physical blow. She saw something in his eyes, then something raw and wounded and real. This wasn't a trick. This wasn't the game. This man was just as broken as she was. There's a boy, she said suddenly. My brother Tommy, he's 7 years old. He's at the farm. If I leave, we'll get him. Brennan won't do a damn thing. Jake's voice hardened. Not to you, not to your brother. Not ever again. He turned to face the saloon. Listen up. His voice carried to every corner of the room. This woman is under my protection. Her brother is under my protection. Anyone who touches them, threatens them, or even looks at them wrong. He let his hand rest on his gun. Answers to me. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Brennan's face had turned an ugly shade of red. Now wait just a minute. You can't just, I can. Jake's eyes locked onto Brennan's. And I did. We had a deal. I paid fair. The girl is mine. And what's mine, I protect. Your protection don't mean nothing once you leave town. That I'll make it mean something. Jake took a step toward Brennan, then another, until they were face to face. You know who I am. You know what I've done. You want to test me? Go ahead. But remember, I've got nothing left to lose. Can you say the same? Brennan swallowed hard. The silence stretched. Then Brennan forced a laugh and stepped back. Take her. She ain't worth the trouble anyway. Skinny little thing. More fight than sense. Jake nodded once. He turned to Ellie and offered his hand. Come on. Let's get your brother. Ellie hesitated. For 3 days she had been trapped in darkness. For 3 days she had prepared herself for a fate worse than death. And now this stranger, this scarred, silent cowboy, was offering her something she had stopped believing in. Hope. She took his hand. His grip was strong and warm and steady. He didn't yank her toward the door. He didn't drag her like property. He simply held her hand and walked beside her, letting her set the pace. They stepped out into the fading sunlight. Ellie breathed deep. The air tasted like freedom. My horse is this way, Jake said. Can you ride? I've been riding since I was 5. Good. He led her to a tall bay mare tied to the hitching post. Her name's Bella. She's gentle. You take her. I'll ride with Hank. Wait. Ellie pulled back. I don't understand. You paid $350 for me. That's a fortune. What do you want in return? Jake paused. He looked at her. Really looked at her. And for a moment, the mask slipped. She saw the grief underneath, the guilt, the loneliness. I want you to live, he said quietly. That's all. I want you to have the chance that was stolen from someone I loved. Your wife, my daughter. His voice cracked slightly. They didn't get to live. You will. Ellie felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. I don't even know you. No, you don't. Jake helped her mount the horse. But maybe that's how it should start. 2 strangers, no history, no lies, just a road heading west. And Tommy, we get him now, then we ride. They rode fast toward the Morgan farm. Jake's men flanked them, a dozen cowboys, armed and alert. Word had spread through the camp about what their boss had done. Some thought he was crazy. Some thought he was a fool. But all of them followed. That's what kind of man Jake Callahan was. The farm came into view as the sun touched the horizon. It was worse than Jake expected. A sagging house, a collapsed barn, fields gone to weeds. Tommy. Ellie was off the horse before it stopped moving. She ran toward the house, her heart pounding. Tommy, where are you? Silence. Tommy! She burst through the front door. The house was empty, the furniture overturned, signs of a struggle. No. Ellie's voice broke. No, 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 Ellie. Jake was behind her, his hand on her shoulder. Breathe, he's gone. She spun around, grabbing Jake's shirt. Brennan took him. I knew it. I knew he wouldn't let us go. He took Tommy to punish me. We don't know that yet. Where else would he be? Tears streamed down her face. He's 7 years old. He doesn't have anywhere to go. Ellie, Jake gripped her arms, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. We will find him. I swear to you, but I need you to think. Is there anywhere he might hide? Anywhere he felt safe? Ellie struggled to breathe, to think, to remember. The old Miller barn. There's a barn, she gasped. 1/2 mile north. I told him to hide there if anything happened. The Huft, he knows to wait for me there. Then that's where we go. They rode hard. The Miller barn rose out of the twilight like a ghost. It was abandoned, falling apart, forgotten by everyone except a desperate sister and a terrified little boy. Tommy. Ellie scrambled off the horse and ran inside. Tommy, it's me. It's Ellie. Silence. Then Ellie, a small voice coming from above. Ellie looked up. 2 eyes peered down from the Hoft, Wickai, scared alive. Tommy. She climbed the ladder so fast she nearly fell twice. She pulled herself into the loft and threw her arms around her brother. He clung to her like she was the only solid thing in the world. I waited. His voice was muffled against her shoulder. You said to wait, so I waited, but you didn't come. And then P came and he was yelling and men came to the house and I ran, just like you said. And I hid. And shh, Ellie held him tighter. You did good, baby. You did so good. I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? I promise. She looked down from the Hoft. Jake stood below, watching them. His face was unreadable in the shadows, but his eyes were soft, sad, like he was seeing something precious, something he had lost long ago. Is he okay? Jake called up. He's okay. Ellie wiped her tears with the back of her hand. He's perfect. He's absolutely perfect. Tommy peeked over her shoulder at the stranger below. Who's that? He whispered. Ellie looked at Jake, at this man who had paid a fortune for a girl he'd never met, who had stared down a monster without flinching, who had ridden through the night to help her find her brother. That's, she paused. That's a friend, Tommy, a good friend. Jake's lips twitched, almost a smile. Come on down, he said. We've got a long ride ahead, and I reckon your brother could use some supper. Tommy's eyes widened. Supper? Real supper. Beans and bacon and biscuits. Tommy looked at Ellie. I like him. For the first time in days, maybe the first time in years, Ellie laughed. A real laugh. Clean and clear and full of something she barely recognized. Joy. Yeah, she said softly, looking at Jake. I think I might too. They climbed down from the hayloft together. Ellie carried Tommy on her hip, refusing to let him go. Jake helped them onto Bella, then mounted behind Hank. Where are we going? Ellie asked. West. Jake turned his horse toward the setting sun. California, new start, new life, just like that, just like that. Ellie looked back at the farm, the prison she had called home for 19 years, the place where her mother died, the place where her father broke, the place where she had learned that love could curdle into hate. She felt nothing, no grief, no regret, no longing, just relief. Don't look back. Jake's voice carried over the sound of hooves. Nothing good ever comes from looking back. Ellie turned forward. The road stretched before them, endless and unknown. The stars were beginning to appear, one by one, scattered across the darkening sky like promises. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring. No idea if she could trust this stranger. No idea if California was real or just another lie. But for the first time in her life, she was moving forward. And Tommy was safe in her arms. And somewhere ahead, beyond the dust and the danger and the darkness, there was something worth riding toward. She just didn't know what yet. They rode through the night. Tommy fell asleep against Ellie's chest within the first hour, his small body heavy with exhaustion. She held him tight, one hand gripping the rez, the other wrapped around his waist. Jake rode beside her in silence. The cattle drive moved like a river of shadows, 300 head of longhorn flowing across the darkened land. The cowboys worked in shifts, their calls echoing through the night. You should rest. Jake's voice cut through the rhythm of hooves. I can't. You haven't slept in 3 days. I said I can't. Ellie's jaw tightened. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back in that room. Jake nodded slowly. He understood. Some nightmares didn't wait for sleep. We'll make camp at dawn, he said. There's a creek about 10 minutes ahead. Fresh water, shade. The men need rest, and the cattle need to drink. And then we keep moving. We've got 6 weeks of trail ahead of us, maybe 7. Ellie looked at him. 6 weeks with me and Tommy. That's right. Your men won't like it. A woman on a cattle drive is bad luck. My men follow orders. Jake's voice hardened. Anyone who doesn't like it can collect his pay and ride. They reached the creek as the first light of dawn painted the sky pink and gold. The camp came alive with activity. Cowboys unsaddled horses. Cook fires sparked to life. The cattle spread out along the water, drinking deep. Jake dismounted and reached up to help Ellie down. She hesitated. I can manage. I know you can. He didn't lower his hands, but you don't have to. Ellie looked into his eyes, gray as storm clouds, patient as stone. She let him help her down. Thank you, she whispered. Get some sleep. I'll have Hank set up a tent for you and the boy. Where will you sleep? I don't. Jake walked away before she could respond. Ellie watched him go, this strange man who had paid a fortune for her freedom and asked nothing in return, who gave orders like a general but moved like a ghost, who carried his pain so deep she could only see glimpses of it in unguarded moments. Miss Ellie? She turned. Hank stood there, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. Ma'am, I got a spot for you over by the chuck wagon. It ain't much, but it's private. The boy can sleep there too. Thank you, Mr. Just Hank, ma'am. Everybody calls me Hank. He led her to a small canvas tent hastily erected in the shelter of a cottonwood tree. Inside was a bedroll, a blanket, and a basin of clean water. "It ain't a hotel," Hank said apologetically. "It's perfect," Ellie's voice caught. "It's more than perfect." She laid Tommy down on the bedroll. He stirred but didn't wake. She brushed the hair from his forehead and kissed his cheek. "Miss Ellie?" Hank was still standing at the tent entrance. "Yes, the boss. He ain't what he seems. I know he looks hard. I know he don't talk much. But I've ridden with that man for 3 years, and I've never seen him do a cruel thing." "Not once." Hank twisted his hat in his hands. "Whatever he paid for you, it weren't about owning you. That ain't who he is." "Then who is he?" Hank was quiet for a long moment. "He's a man who lost everything," he said finally, "and he's been trying to die ever since. Just hasn't found the right way to do it yet." He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Ellie alone with her thoughts and her sleeping brother. She lay down beside Tommy, pulling the blanket over them both. The exhaustion hit her all at once. 3 days of fear, 3 days of hunger, 3 days of darkness. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she didn't dream of monsters. She woke to the sound of arguing. "Ain't right, I'm telling you, a woman on a drive is bad luck. You got a problem? Take it up with the boss. I'm taking it up with you, Hank. We all know what happened to the Sinclair outfit. They brought women and half of them ended up dead in a river crossing." Ellie sat up. Tommy was still asleep, curled in a ball. She crept to the tent flap and peered out. A group of cowboys had gathered near the chuck wagon. A tall, lean man with a scraggly beard was doing most of the talking. His name was Virgil, she would later learn. He had a mean look and a meaner tongue. "She's a jinx," Virgil spat, "and that kid's just another mouth to feed. We should have left them in that hellhole town." "Watch your mouth," Hank's voice was low and dangerous. "Or what? You gonna shoot me for speaking the truth?" Virgil laughed. "The boss has gone soft. That's what this is. He sees a pretty face and suddenly forgets what we're out here for." I said, "Watch your mouth. Make me, old man." The tension crackled like lightning before a storm. Hands drifted toward gun belts. Bodies shifted into fighting stances. "That's enough." Jake's voice cut through the confrontation like a blade. He walked into the circle of men, his face expressionless. He stopped directly in front of Virgil, close enough to touch. "You got something to say to me?" Virgil swallowed hard, but he didn't back down. "I got plenty to say. This drive was supposed to be simple. Get the cattle to California. Get paid. Go home. Now we're babysitting some saloon girl and her brat brother." "She's not a saloon girl." "She came out of that saloon, didn't she?" Virgil sneered. "I know what that means. We all know what that means." Jake moved so fast that Ellie barely saw it happen. One moment Virgil was standing. The next he was on his back in the dirt, Jake's boot on his chest, Jake's gun pressed against his forehead. "Say it again." Jake's voice was terrifyingly calm. "I dare you, Jake." Hank stepped forward. "To stay out of this." Jake didn't take his eyes off Virgil. "This man insulted a lady under my protection. In my outfit, that carries a price. You were just running your mouth about things you don't understand." Jake pressed the gun harder. "That woman spent 3 days locked in a room. No food, no water, because her own father sold her to a monster. And she survived. She kept her dignity. She kept her fire. That's more courage than you'll ever have, Virgil." "I didn't know, now you do." Jake stepped back, holstering his weapon. "Collect your gear. You're done." "What?" Virgil scrambled to his feet. "You can't fire me. We're in the middle of nowhere. You've got a horse and a gun. That's more than most men get." Jake turned his back on him. "Be gone before noon, or I'll let Miss Morgan decide your punishment. Something tells me she won't be as merciful as me." Virgil looked around at the other cowboys. Nobody met his eyes. Nobody spoke up for him. He spat in the dirt and stormed toward his horse. Jake walked away without another word. But as he passed Ellie's tent, he paused. He didn't turn around. He didn't speak. He just paused as if he knew she was watching. Then he kept walking. Ellie sank back into the tent, her heart pounding. He had defended her. He had defended her honor, her dignity, her humanity. No one had ever done that before. Not her mother, not her father. No one. The days bled together. They moved at dawn, rested at midday, and rode until dusk. The cattle flowed across the land like a living tide. The sun blazed overhead, relentless and unforgiving. Ellie learned the rhythm of the drive. She learned which cowboys could be trusted and which ones to avoid. She learned how to cook over a campfire, how to ration water, how to read the land for signs of trouble. And she learned about Jake. He never ate with the men. He never joked or laughed or played cards. He rode at the front of the herd during the day and walked the perimeter at night. He slept, if he slept at all, in 2-hour stretches, always with one eye open. He's punishing himself, Hank told her one evening. Has been for years. For what? Hank stared into the fire. That ain't my story to tell, Miss Ellie, but I reckon he'll tell you himself when he's ready. Tommy, meanwhile, had adopted Jake as his personal hero. The boy followed him everywhere, asking endless questions about horses and cattle and guns. Jake answered with patience Ellie wouldn't have expected. Short sentences, simple words, but always honest. Mr. Jake, why do cows have horns? Protection from what? Wolves, coyotes, men? Do people have horns? No, then how do people protect themselves? Jake looked down at the man. Something flickered in his gray eyes. They find someone worth protecting, he said quietly, and they hold on tight. Tommy nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense. Ellie watched from a distance, her heart twisting in ways she didn't understand. 1 week into the drive, they reached the Red River crossing. It was dangerous, swollen from spring rains, moving fast and dark. The cattle balked at the edge, sensing the threat. We wait, Jake announced. Let the water settle. That could take days, one of the cowboys protested. Then it takes days. I'm not losing half the herd to a river. They made camp on the riverbank. The tension was thick. Men paced and muttered. The cattle were restless. That night, Ellie couldn't sleep. She left Tommy in the tent, safely asleep, and walked to the river's edge. The water rushed Pete, black and cold and hungry. Careful, she didn't turn around. She had learned to recognize his footsteps. I won't fall in. Jake came to stand beside her, close enough to grab her if she slipped far enough to respect her space. You should be sleeping, he said. So should you. I don't sleep ever. Not well. They stood in silence watching the water flow. Jake. Ellie's voice was barely above a whisper. Why did you really save me? He didn't answer for a long time. I had a wife, he said finally, Clara, and a daughter, Emma. Had. They're dead. The words came out flat, empty. 5 years ago, a man named Judge Harrison wanted our land. We wouldn't sell, so he sent men to convince us. Ellie felt cold despite the summer heat. Clara tried to fight them off. She got between them and Emma. They shot her. Jake's voice cracked almost imperceptibly. Emma was in her arms. The bullet went through both of them. Oh God, I wasn't there. Jake's hands clenched at his sides. I was in town getting supplies, being a good provider. While my family was being murdered, I was buying flour and nails. Jake, you couldn't have known. I found them when I got home. Clara was still holding Emma, still trying to protect her. He turned to look at Ellie, and she saw the depths of his grief for the first time. The bottomless pit of guilt and rage and sorrow. I killed the men who did it, all of them. Then I went to Judge Harrison's house and put a bullet between his eyes. That's why you're running. That's why I'm running. Jake nodded. The law calls it murder. I call it justice. Either way, I've got a price on my head and a marshal on my trail. Ellie absorbed this. The man beside her wasn't just a trail boss. He was a wanted killer, a widower, a grieving father. And somehow, knowing all of this, she wasn't afraid. When I saw you in that saloon, Jake continued, I saw Clara, not your face, your spirit, that fire in your eyes, that refusal to break. And I thought maybe I could save you. Maybe I could do for you what I couldn't do for her. You can't save everyone, Jake. No, he looked at her, his gray eyes reflecting the starlight. But I can try to save you. Ellie felt something shift between them. Something deep and fragile and new. I'm not asking you to save me, she said softly. I'm asking you to let me walk beside you. Jake stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Okay. The word was simple, but it meant everything. They stood together by the river until dawn broke, saying nothing, needing nothing, just two broken people learning to trust again. The crossing came 3 days later. Jake led the charge, riding his horse into the churning water. The cattle followed, driven by the cowboy shouts and whistles. Ellie held Tommy tight as they forded on Bella, the water rising to the horse's chest. "I'm scared," Tommy whimpered. "I know, baby. Me too. But we're almost there. Just hold on to me." They made it across, every last head of cattle, every last man. But as Ellie climbed the far bank, she looked back across the river. A figure sat on horseback on the opposite shore, watching them. Even from this distance, she recognized him. "Jake." Her voice was sharp with panic. "Jake?" He rode to her side, following her pointing finger. His jaw tightened. "Who is it?" Ellie demanded. Jake's hand moved to his gun. "That's Marshal Silas Croft," he said quietly. "He's been hunting me for 5 years." "What do we do?" Jake watched the distant figure for a long moment. The marshal didn't move, didn't pursue, just sat there on his horse watching. "We keep moving," Jake said finally, "and we pray that river slows him down. And if it doesn't," Jake looked at her, his gray eyes were hard now, warrior's eyes, "then we fight." They rode hard that day, and the next and the next. The marshal didn't cross the river, but every night when Ellie looked back at the horizon, she could see a campfire in the distance, following, waiting, getting closer. Tommy noticed the change in the camp. The men rode with hands near their guns. Jake barely spoke at all. Hank kept looking over his shoulder. Tommy tugged at her sleeve one evening. "Is the bad man coming?" Ellie knelt down to his level. "What bad man, sweetheart?" "The one everybody's scared of. The one Mr. Jake watches for at night." "Kids saw everything. They always did. There's a man following us," Ellie admitted. "But Mr. Jake won't let him hurt us. Neither will I." "Promise?" "I promise." But even as she said the words, she felt the weight of the lie. She couldn't promise anything. Not out here, not with a killer behind them and 1,000 miles ahead. All she could do was hold Tommy close and pray that Jake Callahan was as good as his word. That night, she found Jake sitting alone by the dying embers of the campfire. "You should be sleeping," he said without looking up. "I think we're past that, don't you?" She sat down beside him, closer than she had before. Their shoulders almost touched. "He's getting closer," Jake said. "The marshal. Another week, maybe 2, and he'll catch up." "What will you do?" "What? I have to." Jake finally looked at her. The firelight played across his scarred face, softening the hard edges. "I'll surrender. Draw him away from the drive. Give you time to reach California." "No." The word came out harder than Ellie intended. "Ellie, I said no." She grabbed his arm, forcing him to face her fully. "You don't get to save me and then throw your life away. That's not how this works. It's the only way. It's the coward's way." Her voice shook with emotion. "You think dying for us makes you noble? It doesn't. It makes you just like my father, running from your problems instead of facing them." Jake flinched as if she had struck him. "That's not fair. Life isn't fair. You taught me that." Ellie's grip tightened. "I spent 19 years being someone's victim, someone's property, someone's burden. And then you came along and showed me I could be more. Don't you dare take that away by getting yourself killed. What do you want me to do? Fight." Her eyes burned with intensity. "Fight to live. Fight to see California. Fight for something worth fighting for. And what would that be?" Ellie hesitated. Then she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief, fierce, desperate. When she pulled back, Jake was staring at her like she had just shot him. "That," she whispered, "that's worth fighting for." She stood up and walked back to her tent, leaving Jake alone by the fire. He sat there until dawn, touching his lips, wondering if he still remembered how to hope. Jake didn't sleep that night. He sat by the dying fire, replaying the kiss over and over in his mind. The warmth of her lips, the desperation in her touch, the way she had looked at him, not with pity, not with fear, but with something he hadn't seen in 40 long years. Hope. He touched his lips again. Clara had kissed him like that once, the night before she died. She had pressed her mouth to his and whispered, "Come home safe." He hadn't come home safe. He had come home to blood and silence, and a grief that never ended. "You're thinking too loud." Jake turned. Hank stood behind him, a cup of coffee in each hand. "Can't help it." The girl. Jake didn't answer. He didn't need to. Hank sat down beside him, handing over one of the cups. I saw her walk back to her tent. She looked different. Different how? Like she'd made a decision. Hank sipped his coffee. Women get that look sometimes, right before they do something that changes everything. She kissed me. Hank nearly choked on his drink. She what? You heard me. Well, I'll be damned. Hank shook his head slowly. That girl's got guts. I'll give her that. Most women would run screaming from a man like you. Most women would be smart too. Maybe. Hank set down his cup. Or maybe she sees something the rest of us missed. Something worth saving. Jake stared into the embers. There's nothing left to save, Hank. I'm a dead man walking. Have been since Clara and Emma. Then why'd you buy that girl's freedom? Why'd you defend her honor? Why'd you ride all night to find her brother? Hank leaned forward. A dead man don't do those things, Jake. A dead man don't feel, and you feel plenty. You just won't admit it. Admitting it won't change anything. No, but it might give you a reason to live. Hank stood up, groaning as his old bones protested. The marshal's getting closer. We both know what's coming. Question is, you going to face it like a man who's got something to lose, or like a man who's already lost? He walked away, leaving Jake alone with the fire and his thoughts. The sun rose red that morning. A bad omen, the old cowboy said. Blood on the horizon. Jake pushed the drive harder than ever. The cattle protested. The men grumbled. But nobody questioned him. They could all feel it now, the invisible noose tightening around them. Ellie rode beside him, Tommy secure in front of her on Bella. She hadn't spoken about the kiss, neither had he, but something had shifted between them. An understanding, an unspoken promise. He's closer, she said quietly. I know, how much time do we have? Jake squinted at the horizon, a dust cloud in the distance. Could be wind, could be riders. A day, maybe two. Then we need a plan. I have a plan. If your plan involves surrendering or dying, I don't want to hear it. Jake almost smiled. Almost. What would you suggest? We stand and fight against a U.S. Marshal and however many deputies he's brought with cowboys who signed up to herd cattle, not fight lawmen. Then we run. We split up. You go one way, we go another. Draw him off. He's not after you, Ellie. He's after me. Running won't change that. Then what? Her voice cracked with frustration. What do we do, Jake? Because I didn't survive my father and Brennan in that hellhole town just to watch you throw your life away. Tommy stirred, disturbed by the tension in his sister's voice. Ellie, what's wrong? Nothing, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. I'm not sleepy. Jake looked at the boy, 7 years old, innocent, unaware that the man riding beside him was a killer with a price on his head. Tommy, Jake said, you trust me? The boy nodded without hesitation. Yes, sir. Then trust me now. Whatever happens in the next few days, you stick close to your sister. You do what she says. And if anyone tries to hurt her, you run. You run as fast as you can, and you don't look back. Understand? Tommy's eyes went wide. Are bad men coming? Maybe. Will you stop them? Jake met Ellie's eyes, saw the fear there, the hope, the desperate need for him to say yes. I'll try, he said quietly. That's all I can promise. They made camp that evening in a narrow canyon. It wasn't ideal. Too many blind spots, too many places for an ambush. But the cattle needed water and the men needed rest. Jake posted extra guards. He walked the perimeter himself, checking every shadow, every rock, every possible approach. You should eat. Ellie appeared beside him carrying a plate of beans and biscuits. He hadn't heard her approach. He was losing his edge, getting distracted, getting attached. Not hungry. I don't care. She thrust the plate into his hands. You can't fight on an empty stomach. Who says I'm going to fight? I do. She crossed her arms. I know you, Jake Callahan, better than you think. You're not going to surrender. You are not going to run. You're going to stand your ground because that's who you are. You don't know anything about who I am. I know you saved me when you didn't have to. I know you treat my brother like he matters. I know you kissed me back last night even though you pretend you didn't. Jake's jaw tightened. That was a mistake. No, it wasn't. Ellie stepped closer. The only mistake would be letting fear win. And I'm done being afraid, Jake. I spent 19 years being afraid. I'm not doing it anymore. This isn't about fear. Then what is it about? It's about survival. Jake set down the plate, his voice hardening. You want to know the truth, Ellie? The truth is that everyone I've ever loved is dead. My parents, my wife, my daughter, everyone. And the one thing they all have in common is me. I'm the common denominator. I'm the curse. That's not, let me finish. He grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. If I let myself love you, if I let myself believe we could have something, I'm signing your death warrant. That's not fear talking. That's experience. So you're just going to push me away? Keep running until the marshal catches you? If that's what it takes to keep you safe? Yes. Ellie stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. You really are a fool. She shook her head. You think pushing me away protects me? It doesn't. It just means I'll be alone when the bad things come. And the bad things always come, Jake, whether you're here or not. She pulled away from his grip. I'm going to check on Tommy. Eat your damn food. She walked away, leaving Jake standing in the darkness with a cold plate of beans and a heart that acted in ways he'd forgotten were possible. The attack came at midnight. Jake was on his second patrol when he heard the first gunshot. Then another, then a scream that cut through the night like a knife. Ellie. He ran toward the camp, his gun already in his hand. More shots rang out. The cattle bellowed in panic. Men shouted and cursed. He burst into the clearing and saw chaos. Riders had descended on the camp from 3 directions. Not the marshal. These men were dressed in range clothes, their faces covered with bandanas. Rustlers, outlaws, maybe hired guns. Jake. Hank appeared beside him, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. They hit us from the East Ridge, at least a dozen of them. Where's Ellie? I don't know. I lost sight of her when the shooting started. Jake's blood turned to ice. He scanned the chaos, searching for her face, her voice, any sign of her. Tommy. He heard her scream from somewhere near the chuck wagon. Tommy, where are you? He fought his way through the mayhem, firing at shadows, dodging bullets. A man lunged at him from the right. Jake put him down without breaking stride. He found Ellie crouched behind an overturned barrel, a rifle in her hands. She was shaking, but her aim was steady. Where's Tommy? I don't know. Tears streamed down her face. He was right next to me. And then the shooting started, and I turned around, and he was gone. Stay here, Jake. I said, stay here. He grabbed her arm, forcing her to meet his eyes. Keep shooting. Keep fighting. I'll find him. He plunged back into the darkness. Tommy! He shouted the boy's name over and over. Tommy, where are you? No answer. The fighting was dying down. The rustlers were retreating, their ambush failing against the cowboys' fierce resistance. But they weren't leaving empty-handed. Jake could hear the thunder of hooves as they drove off a portion of the herd. He didn't care about the cattle. He cared about a 7-year-old boy who was somewhere in this nightmare. Mr. Jake, the voice was faint, coming from the direction of the river. Jake ran. He found Tommy at the water's edge, pinned against a rock by a man twice his size. The rustler had a knife to the boy's throat. That's far enough, cowboy. The man's voice was rough, desperate. Drop the gun, or I cut him. Jake froze. Tommy's eyes were huge with terror. His small body trembled like a leaf. Easy, Jake said, raising his hand slowly. Nobody needs to get hurt here. Tell that to my partners, the man spat. You killed 3 of them back there. 3 good men. They shouldn't have come into my camp. Your camp? The man laughed bitterly. You think any of this is yours? The cattle, the land, the girl. He pressed the knife harder against Tommy's throat. I know who you are, Callahan. Wanted man. Price on your head. You ain't nobody's hero. Maybe not, but I'm the man who's going to kill you if you don't let that boy go. Big words for a man without a gun. Jake's hand moved. The throwing knife was in the air before the rustler could blink. It buried itself in the man's shoulder, making him drop the blade and stumble backward. Jake was on him in an instant. The fight was brutal, short. The rustler was bigger, but Jake was faster, meaner. He had been forged in the fires of war and grief and 5 years of running. He had nothing left to lose. He had everything to gain. When it was over, the rustler lay motionless on the ground, and Jake was kneeling beside Tommy, gathering the boy into his arms. "It's okay," his voice was rough. "You're okay, I've got you." Tommy buried his face against Jake's chest and sobbed. "I was so scared." The boy whimpered. "I couldn't find Ellie. I couldn't find anyone." "I know, but I found you. I'll always find you." He carried Tommy back to camp. Ellie met him halfway, her face strewn with tears and gunpowder. When she saw her brother in Jake's arms, she let out a cry that was half relief, half anguish. "Tommy." Jake handed the boy to his sister. She clutched him tight, rocking back and forth, whispering prayers of gratitude. "Thank you." She looked up at Jake, her eyes shimmering. "Thank you." Jake nodded once, then his legs gave out. "Jake!" Ellie reached for him as he collapsed. "Jake, what's wrong?" He looked down at his side. His shirt was dark with blood. He hadn't even felt the bullet. "Well," he said quietly, "that's inconvenient." Then the world went black. He woke to pain. Everything hurt. His side, his head, his heart. He tried to move, but gentle hands pushed him back down. "Don't," Ellie's voice close, worried. "He'll tear the stitches." Jake forced his eyes open. He was lying in a tent, a lantern casting flickering shadows on the canvas walls. Ellie sat beside him, her face pale with exhaustion. "How long?" "2 days." She dipped a cloth in water and pressed it to his forehead. "Hank got the bullet out, but you lost a lot of blood. We weren't sure you'd make it. Takes more than a bullet to kill me." That's what Hank said. A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. He also said, "You're too stubborn to die." He's not wrong. Jake tried to sit up again. The pain flared, but he gritted his teeth and pushed through it. "The cattle, we lost about 50 head to the wrestlers. The rest are safe. The men, 2 wounded, none dead. We were lucky." "And Tommy?" Ellie's eyes softened. "He hasn't left your side. Made me promise to wake him up when you open your eyes." She glanced toward the corner of the tent where a small figure lay curled in a blanket. "He's been having nightmares. Keeps asking if the bad men are coming back." Jake looked at the sleeping boy. Something twisted in his chest. "I should talk to him." "You should rest, Ellie. I mean it." Her voice hardened. "You almost died, Jake. You don't get to play hero right now. You get to lie there and heal so you can be useful later." Jake stared at her. The firelight played across her features, highlighting the strength in her jaw, the determination in her eyes. "You're bossy when you're worried. Someone has to be." She wrung out the cloth. "You certainly can't be trusted to take care of yourself." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that said more than words ever could. The marshal. Jake's voice was quiet. "Where is he?" Ellie's hands stilled. "Hank spotted this camp yesterday about 5 miles east." "He's waiting for what?" "For me to make a move." Jake stared at the canvas ceiling. "He knows I'm wounded, knows the drive is slowing down. He's patient. That's what makes him dangerous." "What are we going to do?" "I'm going to meet him, Jake." Not to surrender, he turned his head to look at her, to talk. Silas Croft was a fair man once before the badge turned him into a hunter. Maybe there's something left of that man. Maybe I can reach him. And if you can't. Jake didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next morning, Jake rode out alone. Ellie had argued. Hank had argued. Even Tommy had cried and begged him not to go. But Jake was immovable. "This is between me and him," he said. "It always has been." He found the marshal's camp exactly where Hank had said it would be. A single tent, 2 horses, 1 man sitting by a small fire brewing coffee. Silas Croft looked up as Jake approached. He didn't reach for his gun. He didn't stand. He just watched with eyes that had seen too much death. "Callahan." His voice was tired. "Took you long enough. I was detained." Jake dismounted slowly, his wounds screaming in protest. "Bullet to the side. I heard the shooting 2 nights ago. Rustlers. Something like that." Jake walked to the fire and sat down across from the marshal. They studied each other like old enemies meeting after a long war. "You look like hell," Croft said. "Feel like it too. Then why are you here? You should be in bed recovering. Instead, you ride 5 miles to sit across from the man who's sworn to bring you in." "I came to talk." Croft laughed. It was a hollow sound. Talk. We're past talking, Jake. You killed a federal judge, shot him right between the eyes. There's nothing to talk about. Harrison wasn't a judge. He was a murderer who hid behind a badge. That's not for you to decide. The law failed me, Silas. Jake leaned forward. It failed my wife. It failed my daughter. Harrison sent men to my home. They killed Clara and Emma while I was buying supplies. And when I went to the law, when I begged for justice, you know what they told me? Croft was silent. They told me there was no proof. They told me Harrison was a respected man. They told me to go home and forget about it. Jake's voice cracked. My wife died with my daughter in her arms, and the law told me to forget about it. So you took matters into your own hands. I did what had to be done. Croft stared into the fire for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, older. I knew Harrison, he said quietly, knew what kind of man he really was, the things he did, the people he hurt. He shook his head. You weren't the first to come to me with stories about him. You weren't the first. I turned away. Jake felt something shift in the air between them. Then why are you hunting me? Because that's my job. Croft met his eyes. I wear this badge, Jake. I swore an oath. I can't just ignore it because the man I'm chasing had a reason for what he did. Even if the reason was justice. Justice is for courts, for judges, for juries. Croft's voice hardened. Not for men with guns and grief. The courts didn't help me. No, they didn't. Croft reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. But maybe something else can. He handed the paper to Jake. Jake unfolded it with trembling hands. It was a telegram dated 3 weeks ago. Read it, Croft said. Jake read. His heart stopped. This says new evidence was found. Harrison's personal papers. Letters proving he ordered the murders. Witnesses coming forward. He looked up at Croft. This says the charges against me are being reviewed. It says more than that, Croft leaned back. It says you might be pardoned if you come back to Texas and testify. If you help bring down the rest of Harrison's network. A pardon? Not a guarantee, but a chance. Croft's eyes were unreadable. The question is, are you willing to take it? Jake stared at the telegram, the words blurred before his eyes. A chance, a real chance. He thought of Clara, of Emma, of all the years he'd spent running, hiding, dying inside. He thought of Ellie, of Tommy, of the life he'd been afraid to want. What's the catch? His voice was hoarse. You come with me peacefully. You stand trial. You tell the truth, the whole truth about Harrison and what he did. Croft paused. And you trust that the law will do what it failed to do 5 years ago. Trust the law? Jake laughed bitterly. That's asking a lot. I know. Croft stood up, brushing dirt from his trousers. But it's the only way. You can keep running, Jake, keep fighting, keep dying one day at a time. Or you can take a chance on something better. He walked to his horse and mounted. I'll be here for 2 more days. After that, I have to report back. And then he shrugged. Then the decision gets taken out of both our hands. He rode away, leaving Jake alone with a telegram and a choice that would change everything. Jake rode back to camp in a daze. Ellie met him at the edge of the herd, her face tight with worry. What happened? What did he say? Jake dismounted and handed her the telegram. He watched her read it, watched her eyes widen, watched hope and fear war across her features. Jake, this is, I know, a pardon. You could be free. I could. He took the telegram back. Or I could end up hanging from a rope in some Texas courtroom. You don't believe that? I don't know what I believe anymore. Jake looked at the cattle, the cowboys, the endless horizon. For 5 years, I've been a ghost. I've had nothing to lose, nothing to fear. And now you have something to lose, Ellie finished softly. Jake met her eyes. I have you, he said. I have Tommy. I have a reason to live. And that terrifies me more than any marshal or any courtroom. Ellie stepped closer. She took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. Then let it terrify you, she whispered. Let it break you and remake you and turn you into something new. That's what love does, Jake. It destroys you and saves you all at once. Love. Don't pretend you don't feel it. Her eyes burned into his. Don't pretend this is just about protection or duty or guilt. I see the way you look at me. I see the way you hold Tommy. I see the man you're trying so hard not to be. And what man is that? A man who deserves to be happy. Jake closed his eyes. He felt her breath on his skin, her warmth against his chest, her heartbeat matching his. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. I don't know how to stop running. Then let me teach you. Ellie pressed her forehead to his. Stay, fight, live. Not for Clara, not for Emma, for yourself, for us. Jake opened his eyes, and for the first time in 5 years, he made a choice that wasn't about death. Okay, he whispered. Okay. The word was a surrender, but it felt like victory. That night, Jake called the cowboys together. He told them everything, the murder, the marshal, the pardon. He gave them the choice. Ride with him to Texas or take their pay and head for California. Every single man chose to ride. We didn't sign on to herd cattle, Hank said, speaking for all of them. We signed on to follow you, and where you go, we go. Jake looked at the faces around the fire. Men who had started as strangers and become brothers. Thank you, he said quietly. All of you. He turned to Ellie, who stood beside him with Tommy in her arms. This changes the plan. California will have to wait. I know, she smiled. Texas sounds fine to me. It won't be easy. The trial could take months. There's no guarantee. I don't need guarantees. She took his hand. I just need you. Tommy looked up at Jake with wide, trusting eyes. Are we a family now, Mr. Jake? Jake felt his throat tighten. He looked at the bookie, at his sister, at the future he'd been too afraid to want. Yeah, he said softly. I reckon we are. And somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled at the moon, and the world shifted on its axis, and 3 broken people began to believe in something they'd almost forgotten existed. Tomorrow they turned the cattle drive east. 300 head of longhorn, a dozen cowboys, 1 wanted man, a woman who had survived hell, and a boy who still believed in heroes. They rode toward Texas, toward justice, toward a future that was as uncertain as the desert wind. Marshal Silas Croft rode with them, not as a captor, not as a hunter, but as something else, something that didn't have a name yet. He kept his distance, watching Jake with eyes that held more doubt than certainty. He's studying you, Ellie said one evening as they made camp, trying to figure out what kind of man you really are. Let him study. Jake adjusted the bandage on his side. The wound was healing, but it still pulled when he moved wrong. I've got nothing to hide, not anymore. That's not what worries me. What does? Ellie glanced toward where Tommy was helping Hank gather firewood. The boy had attached himself to the old cowboy, following him around like a shadow. I'm worried about what happens when we get to Texas. Her voice dropped. What if they don't believe you? What if the pardon doesn't come through? Then I hang. Jake, I'm not going to lie to you, Ellie. He took her hand. There's a real chance this ends badly. The law isn't fair. It never has been. But I'd rather face that truth standing up than keep running for the rest of my life. And what about us? What about Tommy? Jake squeezed her hand. If something happens to me, Hank will take care of you. He's got the deed to a piece of land in Colorado. Clean water, good soil. You could build a life there. I don't want a life without you. You might not have a choice. Ellie pulled her hand away, her eyes blazed with a fire he had come to love. Don't do that. Her voice shook. Don't you dare give up before we even get there. You made me a promise, Jake Callahan. You said you'd fight. You said you'd live. Was that just talk? It wasn't talk. Then act like it. She stood up, brushing dust from her skirt. I didn't survive my father and Brennan and that saloon to watch you surrender. I won't do it. You hear me? I won't. She walked away, leaving Jake alone with the fire and his fears. Hank appeared a few minutes later, settling down with a groan. Woman trouble? Something like that. She's scared. Hank poked at the embers with a stick. Can't blame her. She's lost everything once already. The thought of losing you, too. I know. Jake stared into the flames. But I can't promise her something I might not be able to give. Maybe not, Hank shrugged, but you can promise to fight like hell. That's all any of us can do. What if it's not enough? Then at least you went down swinging. Hank looked at him. That's more than most men can say. They reached the Texas border 3 weeks later. The land changed. The air changed. Even the sky seemed different. Wider, hotter, more unforgiving. Jake felt the weight of it pressing down on him with every mile. This was where Clara had died, where Emma had taken her last breath, where he had become a killer. This was where it would end, one way or another. Jake Marshall Croft rode up beside him. "We need to talk about what? About what happens when we reach Austin?" Croft's face was grim. "I sent a telegram ahead. The prosecutor wants to see you as soon as we arrive. He's got questions. I've got answers. It's not that simple." Croft lowered his voice. "There are people who don't want this trial to happen. Powerful people. Harrison had friends in high places. They're not going to let you walk into that courtroom and expose their secrets. What are you saying?" "I'm saying watch your back." Croft met his eyes. "I'm sworn to bring you in alive, but once we reach Austin, my authority ends. After that, you're on your own." Jake nodded slowly. "I appreciate the warning. Don't appreciate it. Just survive." Croft spurred his horse forward, leaving Jake to process what he'd heard. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He lay awake staring at the stars, running through every possible scenario in his mind. The trial, the testimony, the men who wanted him dead. "You're thinking too loud again." He turned his head. Ellie had crept out of her tent and was walking toward him. "You should be sleeping. So should you." She sat down beside him, pulling her shawl tight against the night chill. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Liar." Jake almost smiled. "When did you get so good at reading me?" "Somewhere between the river crossing and the rustler attack." She leaned against his shoulder. "Talk to me." So he did. He told her about Croft's warning, about the powerful men who wanted him silenced, about the very real possibility that he might not survive the trial. Ellie listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Then we'll have to be careful," she said finally. You think I'm letting you walk into that courtroom alone, Ellie?" "It's too dangerous, more dangerous than being sold to a saloon, more dangerous than being locked in a room for 3 days." She shook her head. "I've survived worse than some corrupt politicians, Jake. And so have you. This is different." "How?" "Because this time I have something to lose." He turned to face her, his voice raw with emotion. "Before you, I didn't care if I lived or died. I was a dead man walking, just like Hank said. But now you want to live more than anything." Ellie reached up and touched his face. Her fingers were warm against his skin. "Then live," she whispered. "Fight for it. Fight for me. Fight for Tommy. Fight for the life we could have together. What if I fail? Then you fail trying." She pulled him closer. "But you won't fail. I know you won't because you're the strongest man I've ever known, Jake Callahan. And I believe in you." She kissed him then, long and deep and full of all the things they hadn't said yet. When they finally pulled apart, Jake felt something shift inside him. The fear was still there, the doubt, the memories of all the people he'd lost. But there was something else now. Hope. They reached Austin on a sweltering summer afternoon. The city was bigger than Jake remembered, more crowded, more dangerous. He could feel eyes on him from the moment they passed through the gates. "Stay close," he told Ellie and Tommy. "Don't talk to anyone. Don't go anywhere alone." "Jake," Tommy tugged at his sleeve. "I'm scared." Jake knelt down to the boy's level. "It's okay to be scared, partner. Being scared means you understand what's at stake. But you know what else?" "What?" "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep going anyway." Jake squeezed his shoulder. "Can you be brave for me? For your sister?" Tommy nodded solemnly. "I can try. That's all anyone can ask." They made their way to the courthouse where a crowd had already gathered. Word had spread about the trial, about the man who had killed Judge Harrison, about the evidence that might bring down half the corrupt politicians in Texas. Callahan. A voice cut through the noise. Jake turned. A man was pushing through the crowd, tall, thin, wearing a suit that cost more than most cowboys made in a year. "I'm District Attorney William Price." The man extended his hand. "I've been waiting for you." Jake shook it cautiously. "I wasn't sure what kind of reception to expect." "Neither was I, if I'm being honest." Price glanced around at the crowd. You've made some powerful enemies, Mr. Callahan. There are men in this city who would pay a fortune to see you dead. So I've heard, but you've also made some powerful friends. Price smiled thinly. The governor himself has taken an interest in your case. It seems Harrison's corruption ran deeper than anyone suspected. Your testimony could bring down an entire network of criminals. And in exchange, you get your pardon. Full and complete. Every charge dropped. A clean slate. What's the catch? Price's smile faded. The catch is that you have to survive the trial, and there are people who will do anything to make sure that doesn't happen. The trial began 2 days later. Jake sat at the defendant's table, his wrists unshackled for the first time in days. Ellie sat in the front row of the gallery. Tommy pressed close to her side. Hank and the cowboys filled the rows behind them. The courtroom was packed, every seat taken, people standing along the walls. The air was thick with tension and the smell of too many bodies in too small a space. All rise. The judge entered, an old man with white hair and sharp eyes. He took a seat and surveyed the courtroom with undisguised suspicion. This court is now in session. The people versus Jacob Callahan on the charge of murder in the first degree. He looked at Jake. Mr. Callahan, have you plead? Jake stood. His voice was steady. Not guilty, Your Honor, by reason of justifiable homicide. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel. Order! I will have order in this court. The noise subsided, but the tension remained. Jake could feel the hostility radiating from certain sections of the gallery. Harrison's friends, his allies, men who had benefited from his corruption and would suffer if the truth came out. The prosecution went first. They painted Jake as a cold-blooded killer, a man who had taken the law into his own hands, a dangerous vigilante who deserved to hang. Then it was Jake's turn. He told his story, all of it. The land dispute, Harrison's threats, the men who came to his farm. Clara and Emma dead in each other's arms. His voice broke when he described finding them. I wasn't there to protect them. Tears streamed down his face. I was in town buying supplies while my wife and daughter were murdered in our own home. When I went to the law, when I begged for justice, I was turned away. Judge Harrison had too many friends, too much power. No one would touch him. So you decided to become judge, jury, and executioner. The prosecutor's voice dripped with contempt. I decided to get justice for my family. Jake met the prosecutor's eyes, the same thing any man would do. By committing murder, by stopping a monster. Jake leaned forward. Harrison didn't just kill my family. He killed dozens of people, stole their land, destroyed their lives. I have documents that prove it. Witness statements, letters in his own handwriting, ordering men to be beaten, women to be threatened, children to be orphaned. And where are these documents? Right here. Price stood up, carrying a thick leather satchel. He approached the bench. Your Honor, I submit into evidence the personal papers of the late Judge Cornelius Harrison. These documents were recovered from his estate following Mr. Callahan's arrest. They detail a pattern of corruption, intimidation, and murder spanning 2 decades. The judge examined the papers. His face went pale. This is damning evidence. It's also the reason certain parties have tried to prevent this trial from happening. Price turned to face the courtroom. Mr. Callahan is not the villain here. He's a victim who fought back, and his actions have exposed one of the greatest criminal conspiracies in Texas history. The courtroom exploded again. This time, the judge didn't try to restore order. He simply sat there staring at the evidence, his mouth hanging open. We'll recess until tomorrow, he said finally. I need time to review these documents. Jake was escorted back to his cell. He lay on the narrow cot, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events in his mind. The testimony, the evidence, the look on the prosecutor's face when Price revealed the documents. Maybe, just maybe, this would actually work. Jake, he sat up. Ellie stood at the bars of his cell, her face pale in the lamplight. How did you get in here? Hank bribed the guard. She reached through the bars, taking his hand. I had to see you. You shouldn't be here. It's not safe. I don't care about safe. Her grip tightened. I care about you. Ellie, you are amazing today. Her voice broke. The way you spoke, the way you told the truth. I was so proud of you, Jake, so proud. It's not over yet, I know, but for the first time, I actually believe we might win. She pressed her forehead against the bars. I love you, Jake Callahan. I should have said it sooner, but I was scared. I was scared that if I admitted it, I'd lose you. Jake reached through the bars, cupping her face in his hands. I love you too. The words came easier than he expected. I've loved you since that night by the river. Maybe since the moment I saw you in that saloon standing up to Brennan, even though you were terrified. You were the bravest person I'd ever seen. I wasn't brave. I was desperate. Same thing sometimes. He kissed her through the bars, awkward and uncomfortable and perfect. When this is over, if this is over, I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you and Tommy. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. Is that a proposal? It's a promise. He pulled back, looking into her eyes. Will you wait for me? I'll wait forever if I have to. Hopefully it won't come to that. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Ellie pulled away quickly. I have to go. She squeezed his hand one last time. I'll be in the courtroom tomorrow, front row, where you can see me. I wouldn't have it any other way. She disappeared into the shadows, leaving Jake alone with his hopes and his fears and the memory of her lips against his. The second day of the trial changed everything. Price called witness after witness, men and women who had suffered under Harrison's reign of terror, farmers who had lost their land, widows whose husbands had been murdered, children who had grown up as orphans because of Harrison's greed. The testimony was devastating, but it was the final witness who sealed the verdict. The prosecution calls Walter Morgan to the stand. Jake's head snapped up. Walter walked slowly toward the witness box. He looked different from the last time Jake had seen him. Older, thinner, more broken. But there was something else in his eyes. Something Jake hadn't expected. Shame. State your name for the record. Walter Morgan. Mr. Morgan, what is your relationship to the defendant? Walter's eyes found Jake's. I served with him in the war. He saved my life at Shiloh. And what do you know about Judge Harrison? Walter swallowed hard. I know he was a devil. I know he destroyed everyone he touched. And I know he paid me to betray the only man who ever called me a friend. The courtroom went silent. Explain. Harrison wanted Callahan dead. He hired men to kill his wife and daughter, hoping Jake would come after him. When Jake did exactly that, Harrison had already set up witnesses, bribed officials, turned the whole thing into a murder charge. Walter's voice cracked, and I helped him. I passed information. I told him where Jake was hiding. I did it because Harrison had something on me. Gambling debts, drinking debts, things I'm not proud of. Why are you coming forward now? Walter's eyes found Ellie in the gallery. Tears streamed down his weathered face. Because I sold my own daughter to a monster. His voice broke completely. I traded her like livestock because I was too weak to face my own demons. And Jake Callahan, the man I betrayed, he saved her. He risked everything to give her a chance at life. And I have to make it right, even if it's the last thing I ever do. He looked at Jake. I'm sorry. The words were barely a whisper. I'm so sorry. Jake stared at the man who had been his friend, his betrayer, the father of the woman he loved. He thought about Ellie, about Tommy, about all the pain this broken man had caused. And then he thought about Clara, about the person she had been, about the words she had whispered to him on their wedding night. Everyone deserves a second chance, Jacob, everyone. Jake nodded once, a small gesture. But Walter saw it, and for a moment, just a moment, something like peace crossed the old man's face. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Jake sat in his cell counting the minutes. Ellie had come again, slipping past the guards with Hank's help. She sat on the floor outside his cell, her back against the bars, her hand reaching through to hold his. Tommy had fallen asleep with his head in her lap. What if they find you guilty? Ellie whispered. Then I hang. Don't say that. It's the truth. We have to face it. I can't. Her voice shook. I can't face a world without you. Not after everything we've been through. You can. Jake squeezed her hand. You're the strongest person I know, Ellie Morgan. You survived your mother's death. You survived your father's abuse. You survived Brennan in that saloon. You can survive anything. I don't want to survive. She turned to look at him through the bars. I want to live with you the way you promised. And maybe you will. He managed a small smile. Maybe the jury will see the truth. Maybe justice will finally win. Do you believe that? Jake was quiet for a long moment. I want to believe it, he said finally for the first time in 5 years. I want to believe in something good. The verdict came at sunset. Jake stood before the judge, his hands clasped behind his back. Ellie sat in the front row. Tommy pressed close to her side. Hank and the cowboys filled the rows behind them. Even Walter was there, sitting alone in the back, his head bowed. The foreman of the jury rose. Have you reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. What say you? The foreman unfolded a piece of paper. His hands were shaking. On the charge of murder in the first degree, we the jury find the defendant, Jacob Callahan. The pause lasted an eternity. Not guilty. The courtroom erupted. Jake felt his legs give out. He grabbed the table to keep from falling. Not guilty. The words echoed in his mind like church bells. Not guilty. Order. The judge banged his gavel. I will have order. The noise subsided slowly. The judge looked at Jake, and for the first time, there was something like respect in his eyes. Mr. Callahan, in light of the evidence presented in the testimony of numerous witnesses, this court finds that your actions against Judge Harrison, while technically illegal, were undertaken in response to extraordinary circumstances. The state of Texas hereby grants you a full and unconditional pardon. He banged the gavel one final time. You are a free man, Mr. Callahan. Court is adjourned. Free. The word didn't feel real. Jake stood frozen as the courtroom emptied around him. People were shouting, crying, celebrating, but he couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't process what had just happened. Then Ellie was there. She threw her arms around him, sobbing into his chest. You did it. Oh God, Jake, you did it. We did it. He held her tight, burying his face in her hair. We did it together. Tommy grabbed his leg, hugging him fiercely. Mr. Jake, we won. We won. Jake knelt down and scooped the boy into his arms. He held both of them, the woman he loved and the child he had come to think of as his own, and let the tears fall freely. It's over, he whispered. It's finally over. They walked out of the courthouse into the summer evening. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. A crowd had gathered outside, people who had followed the trial, who had rooted for Jake, who had prayed for justice. They cheered as he emerged. Jake stopped on the courthouse steps, overwhelmed by the response. These strangers, these people who didn't know him, they had believed in him. They had hoped for him. Jake, he turned. Walter Morgan stood at the bottom of the steps, his hat in his hands. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, like a man who had finally stopped running from himself. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, Walter's voice trembled. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted to say thank you for saving Ellie, for loving her the way I never could. Jake looked at this broken man, this father who had failed, this friend who had betrayed. He thought about all the pain Walter had caused, all the damage, all the years of abuse and neglect. Then he thought about Ellie, about the grace she had shown him, about the second chances she believed in. Walter. Jake descended the steps slowly. You did a terrible thing. You hurt your daughter in ways that will never fully heal. You betrayed me when I needed you most. Walter flinched but didn't look away. I know, but you also told the truth today. You stood up in that courtroom and confessed everything, knowing it could destroy you. Jake extended his hand. That took courage. Walter stared at the hand, his eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve, maybe not, but Ellie believes everyone deserves a second chance. And I am starting to think she might be right. Slowly, hesitantly, Walter took his hand. They shook once, brief, formal, but it was a start. I'm going to be better. Walter's voice cracked. I swear to God I'm going to be better for her, for Tommy, for myself. Then prove it. Jake released his hand. Words are cheap, Walter. Actions are what matter. Walter nodded. He looked at Ellie, who was watching from the top of the steps, her expression unreadable. Can I say goodbye to them? Jake stepped aside. Walter climbed the steps slowly, stopping a few feet from his daughter. He looked at her. Really looked at her for what might have been the first time in years. I'm sorry, Ellie. The words were barely audible. I'm so sorry for everything. Ellie was silent for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and hugged him. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was something, a crack in the wall she had built around her heart. "Don't waste it, P." Her voice was muffled against his shoulder. "Don't waste this chance. I won't." Walter held her tight. "I promise I won't." Tommy watched with wide eyes, not quite understanding what was happening, but sensing its importance. "Is Grandpa going to be okay now?" he asked Jake. Jake looked at the broken man holding his daughter, at the tears streaming down both their faces, at the fragile bridge being built between them. "I don't know, partner." He put a hand on Tommy's shoulder, "but I think he's going to try." They left Austin 3 days later. Jake had sold the cattle, all 300 head, for a price that would set them up for years. He divided the money among his cowboys, giving each man enough to start fresh. "Where will you go?" Hank asked as they said their goodbyes. "West," Jake smiled. "There's a valley in California I've heard about. Green grass, fresh water, room to breathe. Sounds like paradise. Sounds like home." Jake pulled the old cowboy into a rough embrace. "Thank you, Hank, for everything." "Ah, hell." Hank wiped his eyes. "Don't go getting all sentimental on me. We'll see each other again. Count on it." They rode out of Austin as the sun rose. Jake, Ellie, and Tommy, three people who had found each other in the darkness and refused to let go. The road stretched before them, endless and full of possibilities. Jake. Ellie rode beside him, her hand reaching out to take his. "Yeah, do you think we'll be happy in California?" Jake looked at her, this woman who had survived hell, who had taught him to hope again, who had given him a reason to live. He looked at Tommy, who was chattering excitedly about horses and ranches and all the adventures waiting for them. He looked at the horizon, golden with morning light. "I think," he said slowly, "that happiness isn't something you find. It's something you build day by day, choice by choice together." That sounds like a lot of work. The best things always are. Ellie squeezed his hand. "Then let's get to work." They rode west into the rising sun. Behind them lay the past, the pain, the loss, the years of running. Ahead lay the future. Uncertain, challenging, beautiful. Jake Callahan had spent 5 years as a ghost, haunting the edges of the world, waiting to die. But somewhere along a dusty cattle trail, he had found something worth living for. A woman who saw past his scars, a boy who called him family, a second chance he never thought he deserved. And as they crested the final hill and California spread out before them, green and gold and impossibly vast, Jake finally understood what Claire had been trying to tell him all those years ago. Love wasn't about holding on to what you'd lost. It was about having the courage to reach for what you could still gain. "Welcome home," Ellie whispered. Jake looked at her, at Tommy, at the life waiting for them. "Yeah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Welcome home." The road had been long, the price had been high, but standing there with his family beside him and his future ahead, Jake Callahan knew one thing for certain. It had all been worth it. Every mile, every tear, every scar. Because sometimes the broken pieces of two shattered lives can come together to create something beautiful, something whole, something that lasts forever. And that more than any pardon or any fortune was the truest kind of freedom.